This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Monday, April 13th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Thank you so much for joining us. Ahead today with signs the U.S. could soon start getting ahead of the curve on the coronavirus outbreak. Growing questions now about how the president and other leaders will work to reopen the economy. Plus, we're going to look at how churches celebrated this unusual Easter weekend during coronavirus closings. The virus is affecting politics around the world. We're going to show you how it's dividing the European Union and could help to lead to an unprecedented fourth election in Israel. And we're going to hear from a Georgia man and how he says God healed him from the coronavirus. All those stories and more are ahead in this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to begin this half hour with questions about the U.S.'s economy and when it will reopen. As health officials say, we might be seeing the top of the coronavirus curve. So how soon can we be open for business again? And when exactly, how will that happen? Meanwhile, churches found new ways to worship this Easter, but some say religious freedom is at risk. Here's CBN's Gary Lane.
When and how will the economy reopen? The administration's starting to consider these questions as the U.S. appears to be reaching the apex of the coronavirus. But even though hospitalizations are going down in New York, infections are still climbing in some parts of the country. So with the COVID-19 virus still spreading, might the opening of the economy be delayed?
The models do show that we are very close to the peak, and so I think that information is accurate. But I think it's just too early for us to say whether May 1st is that date. But more to come on that as we learn more information and as our planning proceeds.
Dr. Fauci telling CNN the country will likely see a rolling reopen, with different areas opening up as they evaluate the risk.
It is not going to be a light switch that we say, okay, it is now June, July, or whatever, click, the light switch goes back on. It's going to be depending where you are in the country.
Most Easter services were streamed online Sunday, but some churches celebrated the resurrection of Christ in church buildings or parking lots. In Kentucky, Governor Andy Beshear warned that people of his state attending services in person would be required to self-quarantine for 14 days. In Houston, Lakewood Church pastor Joel Osteen streamed his church's Easter service online.
Lord, I thank you that you're bigger than a virus.
In Jackson, Mississippi, Pastor Jesse Horton allowed church members to worship inside by practicing social distancing.
My concern is, why is it that everything else can be open?
But some localities are cracking down on churches that defy stay-at-home orders. Police issued $500 tickets to church members attending drive-in services at the Temple Baptist Church in Greenville, Mississippi. That raised the ire of constitutionalists and Christians around the country. Safeguarding religious freedom rights during the pandemic is also a concern of Attorney General William Barr. A Department of Justice spokesperson tweeting that, quote, AG Barr is monitoring government regulation of religious services. While social distancing policies are appropriate during this emergency, they must be applied even-handedly and not single out religious organizations. Expect action from the DOJ next week. Gary Lane, CBN News.
And medical reporter Lori Johnson joins us now with more on this developing story. So the president said that deciding to reopen the government is probably the most difficult decision he's ever made. What's at stake?
Really, Ephraim, lives are at stake, and the concern is opening up areas of the government too soon could cause a resurgence, which of course could mean more deaths. And we would hate to see some parts of the country open up and then have to go back to closing it down again. So the president said he's going to convene another brand new task force specifically designed to investigating when to reopen the country. As we talked about last week, pretty much no one is thinking at this point that it's going to be one date that the entire country opens up, but it's going to be piecemeal. And the president said that this task force is going to be made up of, among other people, governors of both Republican and Democratic governors. And they're going to be keeping close tabs on each and every single county in their state to see how many people have the coronavirus and making individual assessments county by county, and also within the counties, certain types of people. We know that people who are elderly, in nursing homes, who have underlying conditions, those people might still need to stay quarantined, whereas younger people might be able to get out into society more, and particularly people who have already had the virus and have recovered and might have those antibodies, which most doctors say does provide a certain amount of immunity.
So it looks like we're talking about a gradual reopening. What any idea what that will look like? I imagine this has changed our behavior for the foreseeable future anyway. But
right, and a lot of people are saying that once we do start going out into the world again and opening businesses and whatnot, that people are still going to need to wear masks. In fact, a lot of people are saying that businesses are going to be required to provide masks for their employees because the workplace, those concentrated workplace, are some of the most dangerous areas. But then we talk about places like stores and movie theaters where people aren't going to be necessarily sitting next to each other, and restaurants where maybe only half of the restaurant has capacity, every other table, and things like that. So another thing is testing. We really need to ramp up the testing.
And speaking of testing, what's the difference between testing for the virus itself and testing for antibodies?
Two types of tests, and we've been paying a lot of attention to the test for the coronavirus itself, which tests to see if the virus is actually in your body, and that's great. But really, moving forward, the antibody test might be more significant as we talk about opening up the country again, because the antibody shows that you had the virus. The virus may be gone. You may have recovered and never even knew you had it. But the antibody test shows that you had the virus. And it would be great if everyone in the country were able to take this, but there just aren't enough tests available. So now what's happening is they're thinking about randomized testing. For example, right now in California, they're doing a study of 900 random people who never had any symptoms to test their antibodies, and they may be able to conflate that. For example, if you have a city of, like, say, 1 million people, you test 1,000 for antibodies, 30% are positive, you can say, well, maybe approximately 30% of the population already is immune.
Good information. Good to know. Thank you so much, Laura. Much appreciated. Want to turn now to Britain, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson is recuperating at his country retreat after praising doctors and nurses who took care of him during the 7 nights he spent in the hospital fighting the COVID-19. An Easter Sunday service to address the country was also had.
I pay my own thanks to the utterly brilliant doctors, leaders in their fields, men and women, but several of them for some reason called Nick, who took some crucial decisions a few days ago, for which I will be grateful for the rest of my life. I want to thank the many nurses, men and women, whose care has been so astonishing.
Johnson also thanked the British people for their self-isolation efforts to defeat the virus. President Donald Trump has ordered the U.S. government to send to Italy medical supplies and other aid it needs to fight the coronavirus. Italy is not getting the help it would like from the European Union as EU nations seal their borders and leaders have begun fighting with each other. Dale Hurd is on this story for us.
Whatever happened to all that preaching from Brussels about the glories of open borders? In Europe, that dirty word called nationalism has made a comeback, at least judging from all the nations that have closed their borders to protect themselves from coronavirus. Belgium even used a dumpster to block this route from the Netherlands. The coronavirus pandemic has shown the disunion among the nations of the EU. The European Union was supposed to be one community, but some of its nations aren't acting like it. When the EU gathered for an online summit and Italy and Spain begged for financial aid, Germany and the Netherlands basically said drop dead. EU leaders finally agreed on assistance, but not the economic bailout Italy and Spain said they needed. Some Italians took to burning the EU flag on social media with the hashtag #WeWillSaveOurselves.
I think it exposes the union for what it is, which is something very superficial and ultimately something that is not working.
Italian freelance journalist Alessandra Bocchi, who has written for the Wall Street Journal, told us the EU is so far failing perhaps its greatest test by being so slow-footed to help hard-hit nations like Italy.
Not only did the European Union not do anything at the beginning, it actually aggravated the situation from an economic point of view. And there was no solidarity because other European countries were just shutting down their borders. There wasn't really that kind of assistance that you would expect from a union.
As the world's second-largest economy, the European Union was built on the free movement of people and goods. The 26-nation Schengen area is supposed to be one huge zone without any border controls. Coronavirus has brought all that to a screeching halt, with a 37-mile backup at the German-Polish border, and similar scenes of traffic chaos across Europe. Even the EU's top scientist has quit, saying there's been no coordinated EU effort to fight COVID-19. It's basically been every nation for itself. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Here at home, strong storms pounded the Deep South Sunday, killing at least 6 people in South Mississippi, where the governor declared a state of emergency after he said several tornadoes struck the state. The storms also damaged up to 300 homes and other buildings in northern Louisiana. Storms continue to batter the South overnight, with much of the region under flash flood, tornado, and thunderstorm warnings and watches. A new wave of locusts is threatening Africa. The continent already experienced its biggest locust outbreak in 70 years, weeks before the coronavirus hit. Now a second wave is on its way, with some locusts 20 times the size of the first. Billions of young desert locusts are coming, threatening plants and crops. Some Africans view them as more destructive than the coronavirus. Coming up, it looked like a unity government was going to be formed in Israel, but now it appears possible Israel may actually have a 4th election in just over a year. We're going to explain why and what role the coronavirus outbreak plays in this development right after this.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
The top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
The ongoing political saga in Israel has taken yet another turn. Opposition leader Benny Gantz of the Blue and White Party asked for a 14-day extension to form a government, but Israeli President Reuven Rivlin refused to give it to him. The decision puts pressure on Gantz and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to form a coalition by midnight tonight. With us now from Jerusalem to help us sort it all out is CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell. So, Chris, why would the president refuse to give Gantz a 14-day extension?
Well, Ephraim, I think it's a sign that he's really fed up. This is actually after the 3rd election within a year. He doesn't want Israel to go to a 4th election, so he's turning the heat up on both Gantz and Netanyahu. As you said, the deadline is tonight for them to actually form a government. They've been in negotiations for a day with no breakthrough yet, and so he wants them to get it done or face the consequences.
So what happens next if Gantz and Netanyahu can't reach an agreement?
Well, if they can't reach an agreement, Ephraim, the next step is the Knesset gets to choose, and they would have 21 days to form a government. Any one of the members of the 121-member Knesset could become the next prime minister. The different parties could get together and form a government. And as I said, they would become the next prime minister. So really, it takes it out of the hands of Benny Gantz and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu if it goes to the Knesset. And that's why Rivlin and I really denied Gantz this 14-day extension, which has been typical. And here we are. This will be the third time in about a year that the Knesset will have a chance to form a government.
So what are the dangers to Netanyahu if there is no agreement?
Well, many people may not know this particular committee, but it's called the Arrangements Committee. And right now, they control what bills and what legislation is voted on by the Knesset. And it's very important right now because there's 3 separate bills that could deny Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu the ability to form a government. One of those bills would say that any prime minister under indictment cannot form a new coalition government. Right now, that Arrangements Committee is controlled by the Blue and White Party. And so with no unity government, they could form and pass this anti-Netanyahu legislation within the term of the next Knesset, these next 21 days. So really, it is a threat to Netanyahu. He certainly doesn't want that legislation to go to the Knesset. And if it passes, he would be denied becoming prime minister again.
Could this actually mean a 4th election in just a little over a year for Israel?
Well, Ephraim, for those that have been following Israeli politics for over a year, the answer is yes. It's hard to believe that Israelis could go to the 4th election in just over a year. That's what's going to happen if Netanyahu and Gantz don't find a solution by midnight tonight, Israeli time. And then if 21 days the Knesset can't find a prime minister or a government, then it would be dissolved and Israelis would go to a 4th election. Now, there's risks to both Gantz and Netanyahu. Right now, the polls seem to favor Netanyahu, and we'll see what happens. But one sign that they're really serious about right now is that they have a freeze on all interviews, which that's very unusual here in Israel.
What role is the coronavirus outbreak playing in these negotiations?
Well, you know, Ephraim, during this time, Netanyahu has been calling on Gantz to find and have a unity government during this crisis. However, Israelis are feeling right now that Netanyahu may be using it for his own political purposes. One poll says that there's a rise from about 20 to 40% of Israelis who feel that way. And there's another poll that says over 70% just a couple of weeks ago say he was managing the crisis well. That's down to about 55%. And right now in Israel is about 10,000, just over 10,000 cases of COVID-19. And tragically, more than 100 have died.
Before I let you go, I have to ask, what was Easter Sunday like there in Jerusalem yesterday?
Well, Ephraim, unlike any other I've experienced, or probably anyone here in Jerusalem and all of Israel, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was closed. The Garden Tomb was closed. However, people should realize that CBN, we have put on a Easter sunrise or Easter service from the Garden Tomb. And if they want to see that, they can go to cbn.com/Easter. And the good news, Ephraim, I was there at the Garden Tomb yesterday. The tomb is still empty. Jesus has risen from the dead.
He is risen indeed. Chris Mitchell, thank you so much. Still ahead, you're going to hear from a man who says God healed him from the coronavirus in a very unique way. We've got his story for you coming up next.
October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
a 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
A Georgia man says God healed him from the coronavirus by breathing air into his lungs. Clay Bentley spent 11 days in the hospital and says he was the first in his area to be diagnosed with the disease. CBN senior correspondent Eric Phillips has his story.
Clay Bentley believes the Lord saved his life so that he could tell a story of hope, redemption, and faith. And there is some irony here, considering where he believes he contracted the disease.
The devil thought that he was going to take me out.
Looking back, 59-year-old Clay Bentley says he's pretty sure how he got sick.
March the 1st of this year, I was singing in a choir. That's where I got it. That's where I contracted it at, is in church. There were at least 45 to 50 people in that church, in that one meeting, that caught the coronavirus. There's already been at least 2 pass away.
Clay says hours after that Sunday service, he started having shortness of breath. Monday, he went from urgent care straight to the emergency room. Doctors initially diagnosed him with walking pneumonia, gave him an antibiotic, and sent him home. By Friday, things were worse, so Clay returned to the hospital and was admitted with double pneumonia. That day, doctors gave him a coronavirus test that came back positive. As the fluid in his lungs increased, reports didn't sound good.
The doctors came in and said, you're not getting better. You know, as a matter of fact, you're in worse shape today than you were when you came in the hospital. I heard the Spirit of God telling me at the same time, no, you're getting better. You're getting better.
He chose to believe the Lord's report, and so did his wife.
I was saying out loud constantly verses in word and in music and things that were the Word of God coming up for his life, for my standing. He has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of sound mind.
Yes.
Then Clay says something happened around 3 o'clock in the morning.
I felt the Lord. I felt his presence. I felt him blow breath into my lungs. I took a deep breath, and I knew it was the Lord blowing in my lungs. And when he blew in my lungs, I took a deep breath, and it's like it all cleared out. So they checked me, and they said, wait a minute. We came here yesterday, and you was in worse shape than you've been since you've been in the hospital. And we come in here this morning, and you ain't got hardly no fluid in your lungs at all.
2 days later, he was released and sent home.
Jesus is still in the healing business. His word in your mouth will move mountains.
Here's an interesting detail. Clay's wife lost her mother several years ago on March 17th, and she says the enemy told her she would lose her husband on that same date. But on that day, March 17th, Clay came home from the hospital. Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Coming up, Americans across the country have been turning to food banks to help them get through the coronavirus crisis. We're going to show you how CBN's Operation Blessing is on the scene to help when we come back.
Robert.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
People are lining up at food banks across the country to get food during the coronavirus outbreak, and CBN's Operation Blessing is helping vulnerable families. Some grocery stores are out of cheap essentials like bread, milk, and eggs, as children are missing the school lunches that they normally depend on. Thanks to support from its partners, Operation Blessing is working with food banks across the country. In Dallas, Operation Blessing gave hundreds of bags of food to Youth World, which focuses on feeding families with children. And in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, Operation Blessing gave food to Suffolk Christian Fellowship and Faith World Ministries. You can learn more about Operation Blessing by visiting ob.org. Time now for your Monday motivation, and here's a thought to consider as we begin another work week. His grace and mercy are new every morning. They offer a fresh start for you to begin again. This is the day the Lord has made. Use it to seek His face more fervently, to love Him more deeply, and to obey Him more intently. With that word, make today a marvelous Monday. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us at the address on your screen. That's newswatch@cbn.com. And you can reach out and touch us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Again, make today a marvelous Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.